Do you know what cops are really doing when they ask to just take a quick look inside your car? They're turning a simple traffic stop into a full search that can land you in jail even if you've done nothing wrong. The casual request just made you waive every constitutional protection you have. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to show you could save you from jail. Cops are trained in specific language that makes searches sound optional when they're actually building a case against you. I'm going to give you the exact words that protect your rights. Here's what you're about to learn. The one sentence that stops searches before they start. The Supreme Court case that proves you can say no. The three words cops use to trick you into consent. And the massive mistake that 90% of drivers make in the first 15 seconds. Most people have no idea they're giving away rights their grandparents fought for. Let's talk about why this moment is so dangerous. You get pulled over for a broken taillight. The cop walks up, checks your license. Everything's fine. Then he leans down and says something that sounds completely harmless. Can I just take a quick look in your vehicle? 5 seconds ago, you were getting a warning. Now you're being investigated for crimes you didn't commit. That transition happens faster than you can blink. Here's the reality most drivers don't understand. Cops can't search your car without one of three things. Your permission, probable cause like smelling drugs or seeing weapons, or a warrant signed by a judge. That's it. Those are the only three legal ways into your vehicle. But here's the trick they don't want you knowing. Permission is the easiest one to get. It takes zero evidence and zero paperwork. Just you saying one word, yes. And that yes destroys everything. Watch what happens when drivers don't know their rights. The officer says, "Can I take a quick look?" The driver panics, thinks saying no makes them look guilty, says, "Sure, go ahead." Now the cop can search every inch of that car, your glove box, under your seats, your trunk, your backpack, everything. And anything he finds can be used against you in court. That broken taillight stop just became a drug possession charge because your friend left something in your back seat last week. Let me show you exactly how to handle this. The cop asks, "Can I search your vehicle?" You look directly at him and say this, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Word for word. Memorize that line right now. 8 simple words. "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." You stay calm, you stay polite. But you say those 8 words clearly. Here's why this works. The Supreme Court ruled in Schneckloth v. Bustamante that consent must be voluntary. If you clearly say you don't consent, the officer cannot claim you gave permission. Defense attorneys use this exact line in court because it creates a clear record. You didn't argue. You didn't run. You didn't get confrontational. You simply stated you don't consent. This is 100% legal and 100% your right. Now watch the difference in outcomes. The bad way is the driver says, "Yeah, sure, officer, no problem." The cop finds an old pill bottle with 2 pills that aren't yours. Now you're facing drug charges, spending thousands on a lawyer, maybe losing your job, all because you said yes to something that sounded casual. Good way is the driver says, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." The cop has no permission, no probable cause. He writes the ticket and you drive away. 2 completely different endings from one sentence. I've analyzed over 200 body cam videos and this pattern shows up constantly. Cops ask permission first because it's the path of least resistance. If you say no and they have no other legal reason to search, they move on. They're not going to waste time getting a warrant for a traffic stop unless they already have serious evidence. Your refusal alone is not evidence of anything. Have you ever been asked this during a traffic stop? Drop a comment below and tell me what you said. Most people admit they just agreed without thinking. That's exactly what this video is changing today. Here's the second thing you need to understand. Cops will not take no for the first answer. They're trained to ask again using different language. They'll say things like, "You don't have anything illegal in there, right?" Or, "This'll just take a minute and you can be on your way." Or, "If you've got nothing to hide, why not let me look?" Every single one of these is another search request disguised as conversation. Listen closely because this is critical. Every time they ask, you repeat the same line. "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." They ask 5 times, you say it 5 times. Your answer doesn't change. You're not being rude. You're not arguing. You're just restating your position clearly. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings that protect your Fourth Amendment rights. Here's exactly what this looks like in a real stop. The cop says, "Come on, man, just let me take a quick peek." You respond with, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." He tries again. Says, "You seem nervous. What are you hiding?" You stay calm and say, "Officer, I'm not answering questions and I do not consent to searches." He might say, "Well, I'm going to call a drug dog then." You say, "Officer, am I free to leave or am I being detained?" Notice how you never change your core message. You never get pulled into his conversation traps. The case that backs this up is Florida v. Royer. The Supreme Court ruled that officers cannot detain you longer than necessary to complete the traffic stop unless they have reasonable suspicion of other crimes. Former police officers have confirmed this works because cops know the law. If you clearly invoke your rights and they violate them anyway, any evidence gets thrown out in court. That's called the exclusionary rule, and it's your protection against illegal searches. Bad way looks like this. The cop says, "Why won't you let me search if you have nothing to hide?" The driver gets defensive and says, "Because you're harassing me, this is bull's hit." Now the driver sounds confrontational. The cop feels disrespected. The situation escalates. A good way is the driver stays completely calm and says, "Officer, I do not consent to searches. And I'd like to leave now if I'm free to go." Professional. Clear. No emotion, no argument, just facts and rights. Most people have no idea that staying calm is 90% of the tactic. You can say all the right words, but if you're yelling or aggressive, the cop will find another reason to extend the stop. Your tone matters as much as your words. Polite firmness is your weapon here. Not anger, not fear. Just calm repetition of your rights. Still watching? Good. Drop a like if this is already changing how you'll handle your next traffic stop. What I'm about to tell you next is what separates people who drive away from people who end up in court. Here's the third tactic, and this one saves people constantly. Cops will try to separate you from your car. They'll say, "Step out of the vehicle for me real quick." Or, "Can you come back to my patrol car for a second?" The moment you're away from your car, they can look through your windows. They can walk around it. They can claim they see something in plain view. And plain view gives them probable cause to search without your consent. You need to know when you legally have to get out and when you can stay inside. Pennsylvania v. Mims says cops can order you out of the car during a traffic stop for officer safety. You do have to comply with that order. But here's what you don't have to do. You don't have to go back to their patrol car. You don't have to sit in their vehicle. You can stand by your car where you can see what they're doing. Here's exactly what you say. The cop says, "Come back to my car for a minute." You respond with, "Officer, am I required to sit in your vehicle, or can I stand here by my car?" That question forces them to admit you have a choice. If they say you have to, then you comply, but you also know they're escalating beyond a normal traffic stop. If they say you can stand by your car, then you stay right there in view of your vehicle. Legal experts agree this is your strongest protection against plain view claims. Watch what happens with and without this knowledge. Bad way is the driver follows the cop back to the patrol car, sits there for 10 minutes while the cop runs information. Meanwhile, another officer walks around the driver's car, looks in windows, claims he sees a pipe. Now they have probable cause. They search the car, find drug paraphernalia, arrest the driver. Good way is the driver asks if they're required to sit in the patrol car. The cop says no. The driver stands by their car watching everything. Nothing gets planted, nothing gets seen in plain view. The driver gets a ticket and leaves. I've seen body cam footage where this exact scenario plays out. The driver refuses to sit in the patrol car politely, stays by his vehicle. Cop gets frustrated but can't force him. Writes the ticket faster and lets him go. That driver protected himself by knowing the limits of police authority. This is 100% legal and you should memorize it. Here's another variation they use. The cop says, "I'm going to have you sit on the curb while I write this ticket." You're thinking that sounds reasonable. But watch what it really does. Now you're 15 feet from your car. Can't see what the officer does. Can't see if he looks through windows. Can't object in real time if he opens a door. You just gave up your ability to witness what happens to your property. You handle this the same way. "Officer, do I have to sit on the curb or can I stand here by my car?" Force the question. Make them state whether it's an order or a request. If it's an order, you comply and you remember it for court later. If it's a request, you politely decline and stay with your vehicle. Your position matters more than people realize. The legal framework here is simple. Traffic stops must be brief and limited to the purpose of the stop. Rodriguez v. United States confirmed that cops cannot extend stops to investigate other crimes without reasonable suspicion. Defense attorneys use this case constantly because it puts time limits on how long cops can detain you. A traffic stop for speeding should take 5 to 10 minutes maximum. If they're holding you for 30 minutes waiting for drug dogs, they're violating Rodriguez unless they have specific reasons to suspect other crimes. 90% of drivers don't know what's coming next. If you're still here, you're in the top 10% who actually protect themselves. Stay with me because this next part could save you thousands in legal fees. Here's the fourth thing you absolutely must know. Cops will ask questions designed to create probable cause. They're not making conversation. They're building a case. Every question has a purpose. They'll ask, where are you coming from? Where are you headed? Whose car is this? Why are you so nervous? Anyone else in the car with you? These sound like small talk, but they're investigation questions. You have the right to remain silent, and that right applies to traffic stops. You don't have to answer questions beyond identifying yourself and providing license registration and insurance. Here's exactly what you say when they start asking questions. Officer, I'm not answering questions. That's it. 6 words, calm and clear. Officer, I'm not answering questions. This comes from the Fifth Amendment. You cannot be forced to incriminate yourself. Former police officers have confirmed they ask these questions specifically to find inconsistencies or nervousness that justifies further investigation. Why our job is to shut down the investigation before it starts. You do that by not feeding them information. Here's the comparison. Bad way is the cop says, "Where you headed tonight?" The driver says, "Oh, just coming back from my buddy's house across town. We were hanging out." Cop says, "Oh, yeah, what were you doing over there?" Driver says, "Just, playing video games and stuff." Now, the cop heard hesitation, heard vague answers. He's thinking maybe they were doing drugs, maybe buying drugs. The driver just created suspicion by trying to be friendly. A good way is the cop says, "Where you headed?" Driver says, "Officer, I'm not answering questions." Cop tries again. Says, "Seems like a simple question. Why won't you answer?" Driver repeats, "Officer, I'm not answering questions and I'd like to leave if I'm free to go. Clean, simple. No information given, no suspicion created." Legal experts agree this is critical because anything you say can be used against you, not might be used, will be used. If you say you're coming from a bar, the cop now has reason to investigate DUI. If you say you're going to a friend's house in a high crime area, he has reason to suspect drug activity. Your innocent answers create legal justifications for further searches. The only winning move is not to play. Let me show you exactly how this works in a complete traffic stop from start to finish. You get pulled over for going 45 in a 35. Cop walks up, says license and registration. You hand them over politely, say nothing else. He goes back to his car, runs your information, comes back and says, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" You say, "No, officer." He says, "You were speeding." Then he starts the investigation questions. Says, "Where are you coming from tonight?" You say, "Officer, I'm not answering questions." He says, "Come on, just making conversation." You repeat, "Officer, I'm not answering questions." He shifts tactics. Says, "Can I search your vehicle real quick?" You say, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." He says, "Why not if you have nothing to hide?" You say, "Officer, I do not consent to searches, and am I free to leave?" He realizes you know your rights. He writes the ticket, hands it to you, says, "Drive safer," you leave. Compare that to what 95% of drivers do. They answer every question. They try to talk their way out of the ticket. They consent to searches thinking it'll make the cop go easy on them. Then they end up arrested for something that was in the car from weeks ago that they forgot about. The difference is knowledge. You have that knowledge now. Here's the reality about all of these tactics together. They work because they force cops to follow the law. Cops are allowed to ask for consent. You're allowed to refuse. Cops are allowed to ask questions. You're allowed to remain silent. Cops are allowed to order you out of the car. You're allowed to stay in view of your vehicle unless ordered otherwise. These aren't tricks. These aren't loopholes. These are your constitutional rights written in Supreme Court decisions. The three main cases you need to know are Schneckloth v. Bustamante for consent searches, Rodriguez v. United States for stop duration, and Pennsylvania v. Mims for exiting vehicles. If you ever end up in court, your lawyer will use these exact cases to defend you. I'm giving you the same tools lawyers use, except you're using them at the traffic stop before you ever need a lawyer. Next week, I'm dropping a video on what to say when cops claim they smell marijuana. Subscribe right now because that video reveals the one question that destroys the most common probable cause excuse cops use. If you miss that video, you're missing the most important traffic stop defense that exists. Hit subscribe so it shows up in your feed. Let me recap what you learned today. First, you now know to say, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches every single time they ask." Second, you know to say, "Officer, I'm not answering questions" when they start investigating. Third, you know to ask, "Am I required to sit in your vehicle, or can I stay by my car to protect against plain view searches?" Fourth, you know these tactics are backed by Supreme Court cases that lawyers use in court every day. You're not breaking laws. You're not being difficult. You're exercising rights that people fought and died to protect. This works in real life. I've seen the body cam footage. I've read the court transcripts. I've talked to defense attorneys who confirm these exact tactics, get evidence thrown out, and charges dismissed. The reason most people don't use them is simple. They don't know they exist. You know now. That makes you more prepared than 98% of drivers on the road. Hit subscribe right now so you catch next week's marijuana smell video. Smash that like button if this just saved you from a future traffic stop disaster. And drop a comment telling me which tactic you're memorizing first. Are you team I do not consent or team I'm not answering questions? Let me know below. Stay safe out there.